Hi, this is Kevin. I'm back with part two of the tutorial for the Jupyter Notebook assignment. And in part two, let's just take a peek at the instructions. We're going to create the section of the notebook where we have raw data, and we're going to have a section for, or a subsection for configure. We're going to have a subsection for analyze city name values. We're going to have to create a program to do that. And then we're going to have a section for analyze state name values. And you're going to create a program for that on your own. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so so far we have the title of the whole document was a high-level title in H1. Requirements and overview were H2s. The next one, raw data, is going to be in H2 as well because it's a second level title. So let's choose Markdown. Okay. If it's a second level title, it's going to get two underscores in a space, and then we're going to say raw data. Okay. And immediately under it, we would like to have a subsection header for configure. So let's just put it into the same cell. 3 pound signs, a space, and configure. Okay, and now we're going to do a shift enter to execute it. Very nice. Okay, so now we're finally going to have some code. It's a good practice in your notebook to put key configuration values into variables explicitly. This is going to help the reader, or you, if you're the reader, when they come back to see what values we're using to configure the run that we're doing. And what we want to do is we want to set two variables. One called subdirectory that's going to point to the data subdirectory, and the other for the raw data file name. So we're going to use these in order to configure things so that when we run programs, we know what we're doing. Okay, now I'm thinking that maybe we could make this type a little bigger, okay? Just in terms of your ability to see it. So this is a web page, right? So I'm on the Mac, so I'm going to do a Command Shift plus to make the type bigger. If you're on Windows, you would do a Control Shift plus. Okay, we just made the type on a web page bigger. That's all we've done. Okay, so we have this. Have we executed the code cell? No, we haven't. It's the first of our code cells, and since it doesn't have a number here, it hasn't been executed. Let's do a shift enter, and we can see now it's been executed. And it's got a 2, okay? I guess the documentation cell was the 1. Eventually, we're going to rerun this. We're going to wipe out the execution history and rerun it from the start, in which case these cells are going to get nice little sequential numbers. But for right now, we just see that that's a 2. Okay. Now, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to run the program called analyze city name values. Okay. And the approach that we're going to take, well, so let's give that a subheading. All right, so we need it to be Markdown. Okay, and we need it to be a level 3 heading, 3 of those pound signs, a space, and say analyze city name values. And so that's all we're going to need. So let's do a shift enter to execute that. All right, so let's see what we're trying to do. Again, I'm going to bring over my already baked version. Okay, and so we're going to have the code here uh, to import the program that we want to run and then run it. And then here's the output that we're going to be expecting to get. And so here's what we've done. We've taken all the city names. Okay, we've read through all the records. Okay, and we've taken the city names and we've counted how many times they occur. Now we do that with a dictionary and an accumulator loop. Okay, and one of the things that we can see is we can see that the mixed case version has a lot of occurrences. We've got 50 of them. So we've got 50 of Arlington with a capital A and the last and lowercase, and we've only got 3 of all caps. And we're realizing that what we probably wanted here was mixed case on the city names, and some of our users miscoded some. So we've got 3 that are miscoded. So one of the problems that we seem to be having is that some things are in all caps. Okay. And then let's look next. After Arlington, we've got Bristol. We've got 3 of them that are in all caps. We've got 41 that are in mixed case, so that looks like what we probably want. We want the mixed case. Okay, then we've got 3 that seem to have a space after Bristol. This is another problem that you'll find. Users will accidentally put an extra space in, and the processing software will forget to strip it off. And we'll get 2 different names that are only different by a space, but if they're different, they're different. Okay, so it looks like where we want to go is we want these to be Bristol. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to read all of them. There's 1,000 of them. Okay, we saw there were 1,000 records in the file, and we're going to accumulate counts for all the values that we find. Okay, we happen to know that there are only 20 values, but if we want to make this a general program, we don't want to rely on that. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to print in alphabetical order what strings we found for city name and how many we had, and then from that we'll be able to diagnose what's the preferred value, which is probably in Arlington like this, and what are the coding errors. Okay, well, we're going to want to create some code to repair them. Okay, because it's going to be hard to get a meaningful analysis of these noisy data. Okay, so for right now, what we need to do is we need to work on the program that it's going to analyze city name values. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's get that working away. Okay. I need to pull all my things to the right spot. So the already baked one goes on my left monitor. Okay. The one that we're working on goes on my right monitor. And here we are. We're back to PyCharm. Okay. So we need another program. Okay. And I mentioned that the name is going to be Analyze City Name Values. So let's go up and right click on the name of the project and say we want a new Python file. And we're going to call it Analyze City Name Values. Okay, we don't do the .py because PyCharm adds that on there for us. And there's that. And so what's that going to look like? Well, in our class, here's what we've been doing at the top of these programs. We've kind of been doing the same thing that was done in the Zell Python book. Okay. So we have the name of the file on the first comment line, and then we say, we give a short description of the intention of the program. Lists all unique city name values from input file. Okay. And we might want to say, and count of each. Okay. All right. All right. That's good. So now, when I did the tutorial, not part of this homework assignment, but a general one that we played before we got to that, I showed you a couple of ways that you could structure code in your PyCharm project in order to be able to import and use it in a Jupyter notebook. And one of the kind of patterns that I showed was we could take a program, the kind of program where we're going to call it, it was going to open a file, it was going to read and process it, or it was going to read it and create a new file. That what we wanted to do is we wanted the program to have a main, okay, and that was really just kind of test code. And then we were going to have a level 2 function that was going to kind of be the mainline code. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my already baked version and I'm going to bring over some code and I'm going to explain it as we go. Okay. So here's the main. Okay. And let's take a look at that. So what I want to do is I want to have a method that I call from the main. Okay, method's probably not a term. It's a function because these aren't in a class. Okay, so I want to have a function that I call from the main. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it the name of the overall program prefixed by the word do. Okay. Now, is this a pattern that everybody uses? No, I've kind of adapted it from some kind of naming patterns that people use in Java programs, and I think it could serve us pretty well here. Okay, so I didn't come up with the do prefix all by myself, but I don't know how many Python people actually do this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a function called do analyze city name values, and we're going to pass it the name of the subdirectory that holds the data and the file name for the input file name. In this case, it's going to be raw data.txt. Okay, so that's it. You know what? When we call this from the notebook, we're going to do the same thing from the notebook. Okay, and so the main is kind of a test for that. Okay, so let's start creating our main function, our primary function, okay? And it's going to be called do analyze city name values, okay? And you'll notice that in order to emphasize that inside the do analyze blah 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 function, you can't see the value of the variables in main, I use slightly different parameter names in order to emphasize that we're not seeing those things, that they're being passed from the invocation of the function. Okay, and so what I did is I constructed a path and file name by using the subdirectory name, a slash, and the file name. And then I did an open for reading, encoding UTF-8. Okay, a pretty typical thing that we've done in our course. Okay, now I think I mentioned when I was kind of describing the program that we're writing that we were going to accumulate counts for all the different city name character strings, and we were going to do that in a really general way. So we're going to do that in a dictionary. Okay, so let's define the dictionary. Okay, we're going to define an empty dictionary called city names. Okay. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to fill it up with the city names that we're reading from infile. So let's look at what that's going to look like. Okay. Bring over my next block of code from my already baked version. Okay. Okay, so what do we do? Well, we say for line in file, so a typical for in to read all the lines of the file. Okay, and we're going to split the line, so we're going to call line.split. Okay, this is a comma separated list of values. I just want to point out that this isn't a classic CSV file. A classic CSV file has two properties that ours isn't going to have, our data file doesn't have. A classic CSV file, in the first line, they have the names of the column headings, okay? We haven't made this a classic CSV file. Okay, and then on each of the data lines, a lot of times, if you have a multi-word value, instead of just having, the value and then a comma, they will enclose the multi-word values in double quotes. Okay, they don't always, but they can. All right. So while this is in a descriptive sense, a comma separated value file, it doesn't follow all the conventions of a CSV, capital C, capital S, capital V, common practices for CSV files. Okay. So we're going to split on the comma, okay, and unpack it, okay. So we have a city name, a state name, and value as string, okay. All right. What are we going to do? Well, because we're only analyzing the city names, we're only going to put the city names into the dictionary. So we use the name of the dictionary, city names. We use the city name as the key value. And what do? Well, we do a get on using the key value city name, okay? And if it's not in the dictionary yet, we give it a default value of 0, and whatever value we get back, either the one that's there or the 0 default we add 1 to. So every time we match the string that we just got in for city name, we bump the count up by 1. And then when we're done, we close this. And we did at least one of these in the course so far, so it shouldn't look all that unusual. Okay, so when we're done, we have a dictionary that has one entry for every distinct string value that's in the city names column, plus each of those has a count. Okay, and the count is 1 or more because if we didn't get any, we haven't added it. Okay, so what's the next thing that we want to do? Well, the next thing that we want to do is we want to print a list of the key values in alphabetical order, and we want to show what their counts were. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's look at that. Bring it over from the already baked version. Okay, so we closed the input file. And now we're going to get the key values. So to get the key values, we call the method keys on the dictionary. You'll probably remember, at least vaguely, that we don't get a list back. We get this thing called a view. Okay, so we need to turn it into a list by calling list on it. Okay, and so now the variable key values is holding a list of the key values, which are strings. It's a list of strings. Okay, so now we'll call the sort method on the list key values to put them in alphabetical order. And now we're going to process them. So for key and key values, we're going to begin at the top of the alphabetical order. And we're using an F string, we're going to print the key value, a colon, a space, and then city names key value, which is going to bring back an int. Okay, so now we're going to have the count. Now, why did I put a colon after the key value? Well, I happen to know that some of these things have too many spaces, okay, hanging on the end. So how are we going to recognize the difference between Arlington with no trailing space and Arlington with a trailing space or two? Well, we're going to have to look at where the colon shows up, okay? All right, now I think we're pretty close to the end. All right, what's left to do? Well, what's left to do is to, in order to test this, we need to call main. All right, so this is actually one of the programs where we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to have a main that we can call when we're testing the program, okay, so that we can kind of test the output by inspection. And then later, when we want to use it in the notebook, we want to be able to import it, and we don't want it to run then, and we want to call the do function. Okay, so what do we do for programs in which we only want to run it if it's not imported? Well, we have this code. If dunder name equal dunder main, and then we call main. Okay, and we always want to end with an empty line. Okay, now given the fact that I copied this from my already baked version, I think this might run on our first try. Okay, yours probably won't because you typed it in. Okay, all right, but here goes. Let's run this. Right click, run. Okay. And let's double click on this and look at the values. Okay. Now, I just want to point out that if we were really being diligent software developers, would we be testing with a file that had 1,000 records in it? No, we wouldn't. Okay. We'd probably be testing in one that had, 10 or 20 or something like that, where it'd be easier for us to predict the output. It's actually fairly easy for us to predict the output here because when I mangled the data, I did it statistically. Okay, so what I did is I created on the city names, I had 20 city names, okay, and I used them to create 1,000 lines. So I had 20 city names available, okay, and then I mangled 10% of all the city names. 3% of them, I think, are all caps. 3% of them are all lowercase. 3% of them have an extra space on the end. And, and I think about 4% of them have the extra space on the end. So you can kind of guess how many we should be getting, right? From just the distribution that I know I created. Okay, so 1/20th of 1,000 is about 50. Okay, so we're expecting that we're going to get about 50 Arlingtons, and we did, but we got 3 other mangled Arlingtons. Okay, we would expect to get about 50 Bristols. Instead, we got 41, and we got 3 in all caps and 3 3 with 3 with the lower. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, with the extra space. Okay. And what's interesting is I'm not seeing any all lowercase, and I don't know why. Yeah, I do have some all lowercase here. So some of them have problems of all lowercase, and others do not, because I statistically mangled these. So I did a certain percentage of all of them. Okay, so this is looking pretty reasonable to me. Okay, that these would be the counts. And because we put the colon where we did, we can see the ones that have that are too long by having an extra space. Okay. All right. So again, we see some of that are long by being all wrong by being all caps. We see some that are wrong by having an extra space. If we go down far enough, we see some that are wrong by being all lowercase, like Bristol, all lowercase. Oh, that's why they sort away from the other ones, because we get all the caps before we get all of the little ones. Here are the lowercase ones. Okay, good. Okay. All right, that looks about right to me because I know statistically how I did that. Okay. Now, for you, if you were testing this code, you would probably have a test file, okay, and it would probably have fewer than 1,000 records, but you would know what the counts were, okay? So, you really ought to test these things because when you turn them loose on real data, you're not going to know what the counts are in the real data, okay, if you're writing this kind of function, okay? Now, are we always going to have to write this kind of function? Well, no, probably not. If we're using data analysis software like Pandas, you have built-in functions of pandas that will do the counts of the distinct values that are in a column. Okay, so we probably won't be writing programs exactly like this once we learn how to use things like pandas and such. But again, the general principle that if you're writing a custom program that you do want to test it, um, you know, don't forget what you learned in your programming course. Okay, so now we have the program. Let's go and call it. And we should see the same answers, right? Okay, so this is a code cell. Let's take a look at the code that it's going to take to call this program from the notebook. Okay, here's the code cell. Okay, so from the name of the program, analyze city name values, import just the function that we want to call, do analyze city name values, and then we call it. Okay, and what are the variable names that we use? Well, the ones that we configured up here, subdirectory and raw data file name. Okay, so if we do a shift enter, that should work, and it did, and it looks even prettier over here. Okay, you got to say one thing for these notebooks, because they're HTML pages and because their typography is so appealing, they look pretty darn good. Okay. All right, so where are we? Well, we can see that we've got some work to do on city names. Okay, because we've got all these city names, and we shouldn't be having, for instance, multiple values for Georgetown. We should just have a single value for Georgetown. Okay, I just got this pop-up that says the notebook has changed. Do I want to overwrite? I want to do a couple things. Yes, I want to overwrite. Yes. Okay. Now, it's sometimes hard to coordinate using notebooks in the browser and still having a copy of them in your PyCharm. Okay, and I'm looking for, oh, that's the wrong version of PyCharm. That's my already baked version. I apologize. Let's go over here. This is the one that you and I are working on. Okay, and we have our .ipmb file, and that's here, and pretty much it looks like it's caught up. Okay, so whenever you get this pop-up that says, do I want to overwrite it? Yes, say yeah, I want to overwrite it. And another thing that you're going to want to do when you're done, and in any kind of a reasonable time where you've reached a breakpoint in your work, go to the menu here and click on File, Save and Checkpoint. And then it's going to ask overwrite. Okay, that's the way that you get it to save it back to the file. Okay, the other day when I was doing the last of the tutorial sequences I forgot to do that in the end, and I lost some work. So you definitely are going to want to make sure you do that when you're at the end of working with the notebook here, or you've reached some kind of an interesting breakpoint. All right, so that's where we are here. Let's take a look at our instructions and see what else we need to do in part 2. Okay. We've come to the end of this second paragraph. It says, and now we say, using this same approach we just did with analyze city name values, you would do the next portion of the assignment on your own. This will include creating the analyze state name values .py program, importing it into the workbook, it should say notebook, and running it. Okay. So what's it going to look like when you're done? Okay, when you're done, you're going to have one more sub section under raw data. Okay, it's going to have the title, analyze state name values. Okay, and you're going to write the program called analyze state name values. Okay, and you're going to import it and run it, and your output is going to look like this. There, right there. Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave you to do that. Okay, on your own, and then I'm going to see you again in part 3. Okay, and again, what are you doing on your own? You're going to add this analyze state name values title. You're going to write the program, analyze state name values. You're going to import it, you're going to run it, and you're going to get this output. And then you're going to join me for part 3. See you there.